and I'm Sarah Blackmore. The contents of our presentation are, we're going to review the literature, we're going to talk about the purpose of our project, we're then going to go into the methods, IOA, the baseline phase and intervention phase, the feedback, results, conclusion, and talk about then the limitations. And I'm going to get us started with the literature review. So a sedentary lifestyle can lead to increased health risks and even premature death. The concept of healthy living through good nutrition and regular physical exercise has become a prominent recommendation in the medical field and beyond. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, they released their second edition of the Physical Guidelines for Americans just last year in 2018. One of their recommendations was to increase movement and spend less time sitting. Green and colleagues in 2016 conducted a study where they implemented 3 behavioral interventions to try and reduce the prolonged bouts of sitting among office workers. There are many studies out there that focus their attention on increasing physical activity, and this is across a wide range of participants: children, office workers, the elderly, and that's just to name a few. One common element seen across these studies is the use of step tracking devices as measurement tools. Pedometers and the use of step tracking devices has become really popular in recent years. Many new mobile applications and step tracking devices are launched every year. Andre, Barry, Litton, Petrie, they utilized pedometers in their 2014 study of maintaining high levels of physical activity with adults. Van Camp and Hayes in 2012, they also discussed the benefits of step tracking devices and state that pedometers are a useful measurement tool, especially when gathering data when direct observation is not viable, and for collecting data across multiple individuals. Our particular study is a replication of the Hayes and Van Camp's 2015 study, and that was increasing the physical activity of children during their recess. Their use of pedometers and a treatment package consisting of contingent reinforcement, self-management, and feedback proved successful in increasing the step counts and physical activity levels of 6 third-grade students. Treatment packages have been found to be successful in many situations and across many participants. NORMAD in 2008 had success with 3 out of 4 participants in his 2008 study of increasing step counts of adults. He used goal setting, self-monitoring, and feedback components. The Hayes and Van Camp 2015 study consisted of 6 8-year-olds. Each of them wore a Fitbit pedometer during their 20-minute daily recess session. During the baseline phase, a piece of tape was placed over the Fitbit to try and gather accurate data. After baseline, the tape was removed. The researchers took the average of the last 4 data points from baseline and worked out step goals for each participant. Those goals were 10, 20, 30, and 40% of that average. Those participants were given their step goals and informed about earning reinforcers should they hit them. This was considered the self-management piece of the study. The step goals had incremental rises, and in order to advance to the next increment, 2 consecutive sessions at that goal had to be achieved. That was for the 10 and the 20% goals. If a participant hit the 10% on Monday and Tuesday, they advanced to the 20%. If they did not, and they only hit it on the Monday, they had to again try that 10% on the Wednesday and the Thursday. The final goal consisted of 20, 30, and 40%. Participants were informed they could earn up to 3 reinforcers in that one session if all of those goals were met. Throughout this goal achieving, a feedback component was put in place, and that consisted of positive praise, and that was given if a goal was attained and a reinforcer achieved. If that didn't happen, words of encouragement were used to try and get that goal the next day, the next session. Okay, Spencer's now going to walk us through the purpose of our study.
Thanks, Sarah. So as we were able to see if the original studies would generalize across 5 busy Ball State graduate students. A main purpose of our study also was to replicate a behavior change study to use as practice before we all become BCBAs. Through this project, we practiced implementing treatment packages, as Sarah said, that involved using reinforcers, self-motivation, and feedback in order to meet our goals based off the data collection that we took as we went through the whole project. And finally, we wanted to increase our physical activity in the form of step taking, since very few of us are able to find the time as graduate students to exercise regularly. And so Riley's going to expand a little bit more on how we implemented this project.
Okay, so our method, so the participants were myself, Riley, Abigail C., Sarah B., Kayla W., and Spencer W. We're all participants with the master's level students in the online ABA program here at Ball State. The settings were either if we were at home or in the community settings due to our busy times. The materials that we used was an iPhone, an Android, a Fitbit, an app called Pacers, which I'll be going more in detail with here in a second, and then a data collection sheet. The behavior definition was taking a step is defined as lifting one foot off the ground in an upward and forward motion, and then placing the same foot heel to toe back on the ground in a downward motion. A new instance occurs when the opposite foot is lifting the foot off the ground in upward and forward motion, and then placing the same foot heel to toe back on the ground in a downward motion. Our data collection, we use a frequency of our steps. We did a 30-minute interval from 6 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And our design we used was a multiple baseline design across all participants. And now I'm going to talk about more about the Pacer app that we use for our data collection. So, Abby, you can go to the next slide. This is the app that we use called Pacer. That's just the logo with the foot and the heartbeat and the weight on it. Next, you can see one of my data that we used. At 6 p.m., I took a screenshot, and it showed that I was at 1930. And then I took another screenshot at 6:30, which I was at 2,176. So for that 30-minute interval on that day, I took a total of 246 steps. So that is what we used. Next, our IOA. We had a 100% IOA by sending each other screenshots every day of our steps taken. Abby, if you want to go to the next slide. We would take the number we had on the screenshot at 6 p.m. and subtract the number that we had at 6:30 to find out how many steps we took in that 30-minute interval, just so we can make sure that we all hit our goals. And next, Abigail is going to talk about our baseline phase.
And we screenshotted our steps on the Pacer app at 6 p.m. Then we continued on with our normal evening routine until 6:30 p.m. when we screenshot the steps again. Once the second screenshot was taken, we subtracted the first screenshot from 6 o'clock p.m. from the second screenshot at 6:30 p.m. to get the total number of steps taken in the 30-minute recess session.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It does look like your display dropped a little bit. Can you, yeah. Very cool. All right.
Oh, was it not on the screen? Sorry.
It was slightly off there. Oh, now it's moving along. Okay.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, is it good? Sorry, there's like the camera on here and it's confusing. So this right here is an example of kind of like what Riley just showed, but so I would take this first number and subtract it from the second number to get my total number of steps within this 30-minute interval. And after I would screenshot my steps, I would send it in the group me, which this is what that looked like in the group me. And that was part of our IOA. And then I would add the total number of steps that I had to the data table, and you can see right here on the bottom where I added the steps in. So we would all add our steps every day. Sorry. And we worked together to decide when the baseline was stable and participants could move on to the intervention phase. So during the intervention phase, we followed the same protocol of screenshotting steps at 6 o'clock and at 6:30. The only difference was that we had a goal to meet to gain reinforcement. We each took the average of our last 4 baseline and needed to increase steps by 10% of that number. Once we met 10% twice consecutively, we needed to increase steps by 20% of that number. Once that was met, we needed to increase steps by 20%, 30%, and 40% all in one session. For reinforcement, we could choose what we wanted to do or eat or drink. We pretty much had free reign of what we wanted to choose. Most of us chose adult beverages, as you can see. There's 3 on this screen. And we would choose adult beverages or a preferred food item that is not often available. So Spencer ate crab legs and Sarah ate Nutella. We also use feedback to stay on track toward our goals. So, for example, if I met my goal, I would get positive praise from my group. And I'm pretty sure this was a day that we all had a hard time. And so we gave each other words of encouragement to try to keep going and meet the goal the next day. Next is Kayla with our results.
I'm going to touch on results. You can pull that up, Abby. So first on the left, you can see we have this chart that touches on, it has the mean and the range for both the baseline and intervention phase for each participant. And if you look at it, you can see that Riley, Abigail, and Sarah, their means all increased from the baseline to intervention phase. But Spencer and I, our means both decreased. If we go ahead and look over at the graph and we visually look at it, the first person to go was Riley, and those little black lines that you see on the graph, point those out. Those are when we met our goals, our step goals. So the 10%, the 20%, those are what those are indicating. So Riley went first, and as you can see, her data in both the baseline and the intervention phase was pretty stable. And then next person to go was Abigail. Yes, Abigail went next, and her data was pretty variable across both the baseline and intervention phase. Sarah was the next one to go. And she had some overlapping points, but she was really the only one of us that had any sort of functional relationship. You can see during the baseline phase, she's kind of on a decreasing trend, and on the intervention phase, she's on an increasing trend. The next one to go was me, and my data was pretty variable across both the baseline and in the intervention phase. And Spencer went last, and she was the most variable of us all. little bit all over the place. So her data also remained variable in both the baseline and the intervention phase. So like I said, Sarah was the only one to really have a functional relationship. Addie, can you go to the next slide? So Sarah was the only participant whose results really showed a functional relationship. All the rest of us, our data remained either stable or variable across both phases. So we can kind of conclude from this that this study didn't really generalize across participants. And there's lots of factors that could have gone into this, and Spencer's going to touch on those in a second. But there were also many advantages to the study, despite the fact that it didn't generalize across participants. It's super important to be able to replicate studies, to be able to further research, make sure that studies are generalized and whatnot. Spencer is going to touch next on some issues that we had, some limitations to the study. So Spencer, if you want to go ahead and touch on that.
Okay, so one of the biggest limitations of our study was time. Time of day that we chose to conduct the behavior change data collection, and then just timing of having to complete a very large project with all of our busy schedules. So the original study was completed during a guaranteed 20-minute recess for the little kids. And as adults, we can't guarantee that we have the same 20 to 30 minutes every day to be doing the same thing. Which is at first it was a scheduling nightmare for all of us. But we made it work. We're compromised on the 6 p.m. to 6:30 interval. And that was just due because a lot of people didn't have their cell phones available to them when they're at work. Other people didn't have a good activity that they could do, that they could guarantee that they could do during that time. So time was a very large limitation in our study. Additionally, the technology that we used to collect the data was not a large problem for us, but it could have been a little bit better. For the majority of the behavior change project, we used the Pacer app, and so it did collect our number of steps, but it did not break down the steps per a half hour. Because of this, we had to each take the screenshots, as previously mentioned. This made us need to use our own subtracting methods and skills, and in order to find the exact number of steps that we took in that 30 minutes. And that can cause room for human error if we did not do the subtraction correctly, or if we missed a number. There was room for error. Or another thing is if the person did not have their cell phone on them and was able to take the screenshot right at 6 o'clock, or was doing something and forgot, didn't have an alarm. A lot of us used alarms at 6 and 6:30 to make sure that we took screenshots. And if the alarm didn't go off, or maybe you didn't hear the alarm going off, that was another technology issue that took place. Furthermore, as Kayla touched on with our graphs, data stability was difficult due to every member of the group either participating in an activity, for example, working out at a family event, driving, doing homework during that interval time, or the opposite, sleeping, just sitting and resting, watching TV, eating dinner with our families. So that varied amongst all 5 of us. Both the baseline phase and treatment phases were affected by our various schedules and the data collection, especially if the person was completing an activity that required them to not be by their phone. So that goes back to the technology issue. To combat this limitation for us to finish our study and to not lose a day of data, one of the group members used steps counted on a Fitbit instead of the original app. And however, some of the members' data was unstable depending on the activity from day to day. So I know that my life right now is pretty unstable as far as each activity that I do every day, and that's why it took so long for me to even begin treatment. A final limitation was the effectiveness of our reinforcers that we use. We were reinforcing ourselves instead of another person providing that reinforcement, and in a way this lessened the value of the reinforcer. Our motivating operations were weak to the accessibility of our reinforcer. And each of us as students were not necessarily in deprivation state from any type of food or drink. Although we definitely held off on drinking an adult beverage, the week before we started this project, and it was a reinforcer. And I just happened to, if I hit my goal, I happened to be in a place that I could eat some crab legs. So it depended on where we were and what was available to us. So we highly recommend the individual being in deprivation state of the choice reinforcer before beginning the treatment phases. For further research suggestions, further research suggestions would be to find a more accessible data collection method, such as a watch or pedometer that's attached to the person's body. This would allow for an individual to not need to carry their phone and take pictures of the steps each time at that interval. And agreeing upon a more common time of day could have made the project easier for each individual to collect the data. But that would have to involve choosing participants and narrowing it down as a real research study on making sure that the individuals that you are performing the research on are available at that time. Because I would foresee I would not complete a research study on individuals that have sporadic schedules or could not maintain the whole entire group project at the time that it was being implemented. So to conclude, that is our entire research replication project for this class in 611. Dr. Brown, what kind of questions do you have for us?
Oh, I have all the questions. Okay. Really good job, guys. Very nicely done. So I'm going to start with Sarah. This intervention be really popular with the students in the 611 sections. Like a lot of people are interested in increasing physical activity and stuff. There's evidence that suggests that Americans aren't moving very much, right? There's a lot of things that said all we do is sit around and we're not getting the recommended steps that we should be every day. I think this is a mean question. I'm just forewarning you. The ways that we make money though are all involved in having very sedentary lifestyles. I think of my profession here. I'm on my computer all the time, and for what I like to work. This is how I earn my living, right? So I don't know if the literature suggests anything about how we're supposed to counter that, other than the shameful tactic of CDC says Americans are all fat and we need to move more. And maybe that shame is motivating enough. But did you come across anything that really kind of increased, that would signal some sort of increase in motivation to get out moving?
Right, and I think the study done by Green and colleagues that was to do with the prolonged bouts of sitting amongst office workers, they had a accelerometer attached to the a pedometer type thing attached onto their hip. And then they had a vibrating kind of alarm that told them that they'd been sitting for too long, they needed to get up and move around. It was actually successful. They had really great results with that project. It increased the movement of the office workers and reduced their sitting. And what they did was, it was again a goal setting. It was a treatment package, and it had feedback and it had goal setting. And the goal setting was, I think, important. Every day at 8 a.m., the researchers would look at the previous day's data and reduce their time from sitting by another increment, and then they would give them that goal, and then they would, and it helped them. It motivated them to achieve a new goal each day.
Yeah. So what's interesting about that is you have this organization that kind of buys into that culture, right? And I think that's a necessary part of this, is where you have like support and all that. I wear some sort of fitness tracker. I think it's a Fitbit, and like it buzzes me every
to get up.
That I'm being fat and I need to move. And I can't tell you how many times I ignore it. Like,
right.
No control over my behavior. But I'm wondering, like, if I was around people, or if I worked for places that, like, at every 50-minute mark of the hour, like, the whole office just gets up and steps in. Like, would that control my behavior? And I think it would at that point, because there's some collective.
Yeah. I do have a personal. So my husband works for Cummins. I don't know, out in where you are, whether you've heard of that company, big engineering company. And they have a program where we have to get 90,000 steps in a year, and then they give us cash. We get $200. Okay. And it's a company-wide program, and spouses are included. So my husband and I, we make sure we get $400 each year. That is a really nice incentive for us to get moving. So I think there are programs and things out there. It's just, I agree, more companies need to kind of jump on board with that. And yeah.
I think this is an interesting transition to my first question for Spencer. I have another question in a little bit. So I'm interested in the participant dynamic here, like, and I think it was clever that you were sure to mention that all of you are busy BSU students, right? So, like, I guess, like, the question I have and just be honest within this, like, how motivated were you all to kind of engage with the experiment?
I think at the beginning we definitely were, because we are all pretty type A people that want to get a good grade. But I think once, for the behavior change aspect, and ladies, if I'm incorrect or not, for the behavior change aspect of it, we definitely were more interested, and this is probably based off preference, of practicing replicating a study more than we were necessarily increasing steps. And so when we were all researching which studies to go on, personally, I work out a lot, or I coach a sport, or I'm doing something all the time. So I said that at the very beginning. I was like, guys, it's going to be really hard for me to get a solid baseline, because I'm up and down all the time. That's something that's already important to me to do, is to increase my steps here and there. But I think we all were very motivated, more so to hit the steps, especially in the baseline phase, so we could all then start practicing how to implement the treatment packages, which is, can we do it based off the 20, 30, 40%? Can we do a staggered treatment where all of us, based off the stability of our data, would start then the treatment phases?
Yeah, so I kind of love that. And I kind of love your anecdote here, because I think it's a really important lesson, in that the applied world is really messy. And like, when you want, like, a stable baseline, but, like, but I'm coaching soccer 2 nights a week, and I'm out chasing kids for that time, and the nights where I'm not doing that, I just want to chill, and I want to sit down, and I don't want to move. You run into all those issues all the time, and as a researcher, it drives you crazy, because, like, you're trying to establish some control over that data stream, or you're trying to analyze the pattern of responses, and it could be that, like, you get, like, this predictably irrational data stream, but it's still, like, there's some level of prediction that you can attach to it, right? And other times, like, it's going to be variable, and it's going to be messy, and you kind of have to make an informed decision about when. Sometimes you just jump in.
And I think that's what one of your comments throughout as the semester was going, it said that, you can't last all summer or all semester as much as you would like to. Eventually, we're going to have to stop and keep going and move on, and have to start writing the project report. And Abigail, can you pull up the our like responses to each other?
Yeah.
That's aligned with my really funny comment about being really angry.
Oh, I did see that, yeah.
So and that was because I was the last one that we needed the data of, and then I missed it. And that's when we had a bad day, but then I was just so angry because I was like, couldn't do it. I think it was like during our baseline phases that I hit like 12,000 steps accidentally. But, and you know, we had to encourage each other through the whole project itself that we're going to be, that very well could have been a form of the reinforcement as we talked through each other. And
I do have some questions regarding that for the entire group a little bit later. But we'll touch back into that in just a sec.
Okay.
So, Riley, I'm not sure if you were the one that agreed on this or planned this, but you presented it, so I'm going to ask you a question. So I really do like the idea of selecting an interval of time to record. I'm just kind of curious about the logic of that. Like, you know, why that time? Why that span of time? Why not a full day? Why not a full hour or something along those lines? I'm just curious.
The reason why we chose the 30-minute interval is because in the original study they did a 30-minute recess, and we tried finding a way that we could just calculate our interval in 30 minutes, but there was no app that was like had a 30-minute interval. It was always they'll track our data from 6 to 7, so it was always 1 hour. So that's why we had to use the screenshots. Why we chose the time that we did is just because some of us can't have our phones on us at work. Especially me, I work in the clinic setting, and we cannot have our phones on us because our clients are more important than being on our phones. So 6 o'clock just kind of turned out to be the best time. I mean, with our busy schedules, we didn't want to do it like too late at night because we definitely wouldn't have motivation to do it like any later than that. So
cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna save that question for the group. Cool. And then so my question for Abigail, I have a couple that you answered some of them. So Abigail, did anybody have like difficulty like remembering to do their screenshots?
Yes. So, I mean, for me, a couple times my like alarm didn't go off, or so this is actually kind of funny. I was at a wedding the first weekend. So we did it Monday through Friday, but we didn't decide that until Saturday. And on Saturday, my alarm went off while I was at a wedding, sitting in the wedding ceremony. And it was super embarrassing.
The dedication to your steps.
And then, of course, we didn't even need the steps that day. And so I turned my alarm off, and then I forgot to turn it back on, and then I was like, well, now I'm late. But what we would do if we forgot was, like, if I remembered at, like, 6:15 or something, then I would screenshot it at 6:15 and 6:45. Cool. And just so that we had the data every day, even if it wasn't at the right time.
Yeah. Cool. So as you guys are working on that manuscript, you'll probably want to be sure to kind of list that as a potential limitation as well. Like, so you had the data point, it probably wasn't in line with the interval that you selected. That's easily defendable though, because like you're close and the time was sort of selected arbitrarily anyways, right? Like show of hands, who here was like particularly motivated to walk more between 6 and 6:30? Yeah, okay. But that being said, I gotta tell you guys, I've never had the thought of, boy, I wish I was more active between 6 and 6:30.
Yeah. I feel like I was more motivated to not have to tell the group that I didn't my goal.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's exactly the question I want to ask.
Like, I wanted to tell the group that I met my goal and that I was getting closer to, we were all getting closer to being done. screenshotting, and because it was just like every day I'm like, okay, I have to screenshot my steps at 6 o'clock, and then I would look at my phone and be like, oh my gosh, it's 6:02.
Well, and that was a future research suggestion in the original study. Using momentary time sampling, it says to collect data on activity type and social interactions, and it says because previous research has found that peer presence does influence physical activity.
Yeah.
And I think that, sorry, and I think that ties back in with the whole feedback component of the intervention and the self-management piece. You know, we wanted to get those goals in, not just for ourselves, but for others, and we wanted that feedback to say, hey, great, you've done that goal, that's done.
Yeah.
So I think part of the intervention did work, it just...
I just wasn't as, I know we all talked about this, but we just weren't as motivated by the thing we were getting than the actual, like, intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, and I gotta tell you, the selection of some of these reinforcers is interesting because they actually counter to the behavior that you're trying to produce. Like, you know, like I saw a lot of your reinforcers. Are like, you know, we got some Nutella, we got some salt beverages, we got some crab legs. They're probably dipped in butter, right? Dipped in butter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, let's think about that. Like, like we're going to increase some steps, and then we're going to immediately counteract the effect that those steps might have actually had. That's an interesting approach.
Yeah.
I think we talked about that too when we were designing.
Very ironic.
I'm going to stay on you for one more question, Abigail. Did anyone ever check the validity of the trackers?
Yes. So when we first started, we were going to use the iPhone Health app, and the first day we were trying to do it, of course it was my phone, and it wasn't tracking in real time, so we had to find a different app, and we tried like a couple other ones, and then we figured out the Pacer app worked, and I mean, we also had, like, Spencer would use her Fitbit and her phone, so she could kind of look at both and see if they were close, see the...
Yeah. There's probably some error in these days.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I also felt like there were errors with all of them, because sometimes I would be walking and holding my phone and nothing would happen.
Yeah.
So,
cool.
I think the best way we could have gone would probably have been an actual pedometer.
Yeah.
Right, and we did like think about, because we didn't all have the same kind of wrist pedometer. Some of us had Fitbit, some of us had Apple Watches, right? So we would try to find something that we could all use, that Pacer app.
Yeah.
And we did try to like do 10 steps and see, but it was like the upload speed would mess it all up. And I think that's what you were saying, wasn't you? That we couldn't, it wasn't updating in real time, so it was hard to see how accurate it was.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think with any of these studies too, when you're dealing with like technology, that's relatively new and getting more and more intricate. And I think mine actually has a credit card on it, which is strange. Like it has it, but like there's going to be some error. Right? I think providing some assurance that, like, you know, it's somewhat valid and somewhat reliable, but, like, you know, interpret with caution, because we don't know. Because you don't, unless you were counting your steps in your head as you were walking too, which is, I don't recommend that. That's not fun.
Well, we were at least able to be safe enough with our technology that we collected, like, all of our data is accounted for, and that's what we collected in that group chat. But the original study lost some of their data due to syncing issues, and I think that would have crushed all of us if we all like were trying to be mindful of increasing our steps, especially when I had to do like an extra 600 one day. And so I think I would have just absolutely crushed if technology was not on my side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But for the most part, everything went well.
Cool.
Would have been a lot worse.
I do want to be a little sensitive to time, so I'm going to speed up here. And it's Kayla, right? Kayla?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, cool. So I'm just going to speak boldly here and say that it looks like you guys didn't have an effective study here. Is that fair?
No, I would it definitely did not generalize.
Okay, cool. So that being said, I mean, we talked about a few reasons. Do you have any other reasons to maybe speculate as to why things weren't effective?
I mean, Spencer really touched on all of them. I mean, I really think that the deprivation one was a huge aspect. Like, I have open access to wine and adult beverages and Nutella whenever I want. I'm an adult. Like, I was not deprived of those things, so those things weren't as motivating to me as they could have been. I think, honestly, that was the biggest one. The biggest, like, we were just, the motivation was not there.
Yeah. So let me ask this question. I was kind of saving for the group, but I think I'll ask you first. Was the social component here, did it have any power in relation to the study?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it did. I mean, I definitely didn't want to let my group members down, didn't want to let the professor down, wanted to get a good grade on the project, wanted to make sure that I was getting things done. I didn't want them to be upset with me if I forgot. Like, if I missed my screenshot, I would panic. If I missed it at 6 or at 6:30, I would panic, and I'd immediately be like, oh, sorry, guys. Like, you can see in one of my messages, too. I'm like, sorry for the late response, like, excessively apologizing if I, like, would miss or send a message late. So I definitely think that that was a huge aspect affecting, like, the motivation to get things done.
Okay, cool. So, question for the group: who wore a tracker before this study?
Me.
Okay.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, okay, hit and miss, right? Is anybody planning on wearing a tracker after this study?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
I got to get my $200.
There's
Could have done that.
So I guess, so this question probably doesn't matter then because of the previous history, but like, I was really curious for those that maybe weren't wearing the tracker, if just tracking in itself increased your steps.
I think yes. I wear my Apple Watch, but I don't necessarily like look at my steps every day, and I was definitely looking at them every day, obviously, and I did want to increase my steps. And I've done a step challenge in the past. I work at a school, and the whole school did a step challenge, and I was super motivated from looking at my steps. I wanted to increase them.
I still have the Pacer app, and I still get like notifications. You did this many steps yesterday. You did this many steps, and it kind of, I'm like, oh wow, did 3,000 yesterday. Whoops. Should have moved a little more. So yeah, I think it's still ongoing. I don't think it's just done.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time when I got my Fitbit that you think you walk a ton, especially in like our clinic setting or as teachers where we're chasing around little kids, but until you do start tracking it, you have no idea, because it may be that you walked a lot in one time period, but otherwise you're not. And so if you give yourself a goal to hit, that is forcing your body to move. And so I tell people when anytime I want somebody comes to me and asks me like, well, how do you lose weight? How do you stay fit? That and the other. Like, just start with counting your steps. Get a step tracker and see where you're even starting, because you probably think that you're moving a ton, but in reality, until you collect the data, you're not.
Yeah.
You don't know.
And there's been a lot of speculation and like things that are coming out of ABA right now that are like using Fitbits and just kind of having like a control condition where like, hey, like does just giving the Fitbit result in increase? What they see, there's like a spike, and those spikes aren't really maintained.
Right. I was just going to say, I think the novelty wears off. I think, the idea is great to start with, but then like everything else, it maybe just gets pushed to the side and doesn't, like you say, maintain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because cheeseburgers and Nutella and wine, they're awesome. Like, it's really hard. Cool. Well, I gotta say, guys, I love the encouragement that you guys, or I love like seeing some of the evidence of the encouragement that you guys were doing there. I think there were maybe some potential issues with, trying to find some of those tangible reinforcers, and I think you've all really kind of outlined those as well. Like Spencer, I find it hard to believe if you had access to crab legs and you didn't hit your step count that you wouldn't eat the crab legs. Like crab legs are gonna get eaten with that. Come on, let's be real.
They taste even better.
When you earn them, but like also there's some sort of guilty pleasure about, ooh, I didn't earn this, but it's still but I think that you guys have kind of identified that like the social component is probably the effective part of this, and I think that's cool that like I'm imagining that maybe you guys didn't really know each other beforehand, and like that's kind of neat that like if you saw some changes or if you like made an effort to step more on certain days because you didn't want to let your group down, like there's something cool about that. Like I think that that's really neat. So I'm really sort of in awe of that, if anything, about this. That's a neat part. So cool, guys. We'll go ahead and switch off the recording. Thanks so much. I think this